Good afternoon. 5 after 4, good. We are here in the third part of section 1 of a course or a series of classes that is going on for as long as there are people to come listen to it, right? We are looking at the writings of one of the great Hasidic masters, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lehner of Ishbitz, right? Lehner is a very good name for a rabbi, of course, meaning reader. And I can be really, really smart and tell you all of the details that you need to know about him. And 1801 to 1854. So died, 160 something years ago, something like that. Relatively recent when we look at all the books around here that were written. He's known by the name of his single book that he wrote, Mei HaShiloach, the waters of the Siloam Pool. So if you've been to the old city, Siloam Pool is in the old city, it's mentioned in the Bible. Hezekiah's tunnel and all that sort of stuff is there. And he is described as that by one of his contemporaries and given the name Waters of the Pool because, like we say in English, still waters run deep. The depth of his thought and the depth of the things that he shares with us are filled with incredible depth, incredible amounts of meaning. We've been looking here at a text connected to the book of Exodus, chapter 38. And there are two handouts, and if you have them, fine. If you don't, I'm going to give them to you. And if you happen to be listening to us or watching us on YouTube, that is definitely available. You have one, I'm going to give you two.
What is the text again? Which chapter?
The chapter is Exodus 38, and it is, 28 rather, Exodus 28. It is that entire chapter, and you should have two handouts like this. If you're watching us online, give us a call, as they used to say. Be in touch with us via the website, and you can have a copy of these sent to you free, gratis, and for nothing. Essentially, what the Mei HaShiloach, what the Rabbi of Ishbitz is doing, is taking lists of things in the Hebrew Bible, and a little bit later on, if you stick around and we get to it, a couple of lists from the Talmud about various things, and giving us a set of suggestions and recommendations. Here I have called this the 8 Habits of Spiritual People. And if you read Stephen Covey's book, The 8 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's a little, I don't know if there's a parallel, but I certainly put that out in the second handout, which is the one on 2 sides. It is a little bit complicated to wrap my head around. I can't speak for you, and I can't say we, because these are not things that we're used to talking about, and not things that we're used to seeing or learning about. Right? We didn't grow up with pictures of the temple in our mind. Right? Nonetheless, I think it is an incredibly valuable exercise to look at what the Bible says, what the Talmud says, what is implied in one of the sources from the prayer book that we looked at, and what the Rebbe of Ishbitz is telling us each of these garments represents. So basically, and at its most direct, he's saying you are the high priest of your own life. When you get up in the morning and you get dressed, you put on not just your pants, your skirt, whatever it is you happen to wear, but you put on metaphorical garments that represent habits that you need to have in your life. Right? So you can do this as a meditation first thing in the morning. You can do this as a meditation for last thing at night. You can do this once a week when you sit back and think about it. Or you can never think about this at all. Because there are 3, maybe, I think there's 4 other sets of lists. The next 2 classes that we'll do, we'll take the same text, the same 8 garments of the high priest, and give them a different set of meanings. that are not entirely like ours, but are not entirely different either. Oy, a recipe for confusion. No, it's a recipe for one of the most fundamental things that this branch of Hasidism teaches. And there are as many types of Chassidut, there are many types of this approach to Jewish texts and to Jewish life. Here we are saying, take responsibility for yourself. There is a Rabbi, there is a great rabbi in the generation, there is a tzaddik, there is the perfect righteous person, but that is not the entire focus of all of existence. Right? There are other branches of Judaism and certainly other branches of Hasidism which say that. It's all about the rabbi, it's all about the tzaddik, it's all about the most righteous man of the generation. Right? And it's only into our time that we've had a couple of women who have taken that sort of role without the formalities attached to it. Here, with Ishbitz, we're very, very firmly saying, you can be a tzaddik, you have the right to rise to the highest possible levels, you can and you must be the best of a spiritual person you can possibly be. And here is a mechanism. He has alternatives. He has alternative sets. And you're individuals. What works for me doesn't work for you. What works for me and doesn't work for you works partly for someone else. And then it's time of life, right? We've all been on this earth a couple of years, and our sets of priorities and our needs change over time. There's no such thing as one size fits all, right? And that's a huge, huge thing, right? Because we look at certain segments of the Jewish world and we say, everybody thinks the same in those groups. This is not the way it's supposed to be, or this is certainly not the way that we are learning here, right? We looked at the Bible, at the book of Exodus, chapter 28, and if you want to make a very quick review of that, it is on page 3 in the handout with lots of pages. There's one that's five-page handout. And that lists what the items of clothing are. We took a look at the prayer before the Shema, part of the liturgy, which lists 8 things that we ask God to do. And then we took a look at the very first page on the handout, which is from the Babylonian Talmud, from the Bavli, and that lists what each of the individual garments of the high priest atone for. Right? It's the second bracha, second blessing, please, second paragraph before the Shema.
We say the Shachrit in the morning, and we say the Shema right before. Here is our Lord our God. There is one. There's this blessing that says, "Our Father, compassionate Father, ever compassionate, have compassion on us, instill in our hearts the desire to understand, to discern, to listen, to learn, to teach, to observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah and love." Those are the 8, each one of these descriptions, 8 descriptions are parallel to the 8 garments of the Kohen. Okay?
Right. So we're taking the time to go through all of this background, because what we have in the Mea Shiloach, in this one volume, is actually the absolute distilled, dried down, compounded essence of what he said. The text that we're looking at, we can read through in a couple of minutes with no difficulty. I'm going to guess when he gave over this Torah, when he gave over this teaching, it took him more than a couple of minutes, right? And maybe they sang a song in between and did a nigun and drank l'chaim, but whatever it was, it didn't come out in a couple of minutes. We have the distilled essence. So we have a very, very tightly packed text that needs to have this sort of background and the route that we travel to get to the ultimate conclusion and what the 8 habits are.
There's one point that you mentioned in a previous class you didn't yet mention, and that each one of the 8 garments atones for a certain type of a sin.
Right. That's the Talmud passage that we had on page number 1 in the 5-page handout. That we'll just go through this very, very quickly again, because I think it's It's worth looking at. It's page 1 right here. And it is Rabbi Anai ben Sasson says, the priestly garments atone for the sins of the Jewish people in specific ways. The ketonet, the tunic, atones for bloodshed, murder. The pants, the michnasayim that the priest put on, procures atonement for incest. Right? It covers up those particular parts. The mitznefet, the headpiece, the mitre, some of the translations would call it a turban. Right? If you look at the pictures on the website of the Temple Institute, you'll see it's more towards a turban than a mitre that you would see on the head of a bishop or a priest of the Anglican Church. Arrogance. It goes on top of your head. You look down. I'm higher than everyone else. The avnet, here he calls it a girdle or a belt. It was wrapped round and round and round and round and round and round. So it was 15 or I think 16 meters long. It was a really long belt. It covered the heart. Thoughts. Controlling your thoughts. This was, as the Talmud presents it, the belt procures atonement. Whereas, as the Rebbe of Ishbitz is going to say, you've got to take this and make this part of your life before you do these things. The choshen, again, we're up to 2 words here, choshen and ephod, are words that we don't really have a great word in English for. Breastplate. Procured atonement for errors in legal decisions. It is called, in the text itself here, the choshen hamishpat, the breastplate of judgment. Don't make mistakes about other people. Don't misjudge. Everyone is equal before the law. That's where we're going to be going with that. Ephod is a word that we don't have a translation for at all. I certainly don't have an English word for it. Actually, I do. On my second handout, it's called either an apron or a cape. It looks like the sort of apron you wear in the kitchen when you're cooking, but put on backwards. Right? Again, Temple Institute website. Or if you have an art scroll, Bible art scroll, Chumash there, they do have drawings of that there. Right? They wore a me'il. He wore a robe. That's an easy one. The robe, yeah, you see, I think backwards, an apron put on backwards.
Robe, which robe? This is a robe. This.
That's the ephod.
Right, I'm still a little bit confused about this and which one went on first. I think it would help us to go see these things. But these are 3 different things that were on. The me'il was a robe. It looked like a long woman's dress.
Maybe this.
That is that one.
This robe.
They're different sets of pictures of what they look like, but the robe certainly was a long sleeveless dress, would be the way it looked. And it had bells on it, right? And the atonement is here for slander.
Yeah.
The robe makes a sound.
There's little bells.
It had little bells. It had bells on it. And for some reason, the high priest certainly needed to be heard when he was moving about and doing his job. And then on top of the mitre or the turban, they had a tzitz, a golden plate, which atoned for impudent deeds. Doing things with a haughty head. Well, let's see how this all works out, because we're in the text. If you have the one where it's the Hebrew text and you can follow that, that's wonderful. If not, we're going to start reading on page number 3. Reasonably clear so far? Deep breath. This is not impossible, right? This is doable. All of this is doable. And once you get into your mind a reasonably good picture of what these clothes are, you can put them on, and you should be able to put them on all at the same time, or rather one after the other, right? And then you are fully dressed in your spiritual armor, right? And this is the sort of technology and the sort of terminology, rather, that we need to use with these things. because the great Hasidic masters were not out to tell you, it's written in the Torah this, and that means that. And they're not primarily concerned with, well, maybe you should be keeping the laws of kashrus more meticulously. They're concerned about it, of course. But what their real focus is that you live up to your full God-given potential. And that you even go beyond that. Okay? So I'm going to look at the Hebrew and I'm going to look at the English at the same time. And in the Hebrew, it's about 5 or 6 lines down where the heavy lines start. And on page number 3, this is where we have been heading for the last 3 sessions. All right? The translation is my own, so you are perfectly entitled to disagree with it. There is, by the way, a translation of this whole book. The Mehashiloach is translated into English by someone we know, Rabbi Bezalel Edwards. Remember him? I haven't seen him in quite a while. Maybe he moved out of town, but... Okay. Fascinating character, great musician, nice guy. And he did a complete translation. You can get the book on Amazon. So, here we go. All right? Parallel to the 8 garments. It's like the second paragraph on page number 3 here. That's the second paragraph on page number 2 in the Hebrew as well. So parallel to the 8 garments. Good afternoon. Good everything. Parallel to the 8 garments, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah placed 8 things in the blessings before the Shema. Who are the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah? We talked about this last time. These were the successors to the prophets and started off with Ezra, with Nehemiah, that particular type of period. And they were the ones who instituted and fixed the canon of the Bible and how the prayer book is set up. They put into the blessing before the Shema, which Rabbi Poston just showed you, a list of 8 things which are parallel to the 8 garments. This is what I think the Mehashiloach is doing. He's taking lists that you should know off by heart. And if you don't, you can very easily learn them. You can memorize 8 words, right? In my days in graduate school and the seminary, we used mnemonics, right? Very, very old-fashioned means of getting through examinations. It works, right? You memorize these things, either in English or in Hebrew. You make a word, either a nonsense word or a real word or a sentence, and you remember them all. And if you're one of those people who pray every day, which we hope you are, these words are entirely in your mind already, right? So the list is to understand, to be wise. It's right here in the middle of page number 3, right? What's the difference between all of these things? To understand, to be wise, to listen, to learn, to teach, to keep, to do, and to uphold. Right? And each one of those parallels one of the garments of the high priest, and based on all of this stuff, he is going to now tell us what this particular garment refers to and what we should be thinking about when we metaphorically or in a meditation put it on. Okay? Lahavin, number 1, to understand. That parallels the avnate, the belt, which the high priest wore around his middle. It was a very large belt, and there was a lot of it. It atones for fantasies of the heart. Right? You can see exactly what he's doing here. He's taking the belt, which the Talmud tells us procures atonement for sinful thoughts of the heart. And what you have to do with it is then stop fantasizing. Learn to keep your heart under as much control as you possibly can. Don't be a Walter Mitty. Don't imagine you are at a certain level when you're not, right? We're talking here about spiritual development. I mean, in relationships, we see this quite a lot as well, right? All of this stuff is incredibly universal. Don't imagine your partner or prospective or future partner is when they are clearly not, right? And there are shared fantasies and shared delusions.
You shared with us that the length was 32
The length was 32 cubits.
And you see here, it covers a large part of your chest,
Right.
including your heart.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's interesting because your heart is 32, not the bed.
Is the same word, word as heart.
I mean, it's from the Gemara. He quoted from the Gemara that
Right.
But is he going to connect that anyway?
That's already considered as pre-connected. The Gemara that we looked at, which is number 1, the girdle procures atonement for sinful thoughts of the heart, for it atones where it is worn.
But that's it atones where it's worn.
Yeah.
Like the pants.
Like the pants control your lower regions.
And the thing on the head.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so some of them are really simple and straightforward like that, but we're going to see some of them are a bit more complex and will take us into another world literally, right? Emotions are wonderful, and imagining and thinking how things could be and should be is great, but you can't live there. You can't live in a fantasy world, right? Accept the reality that is around you. And that's number 1. L'haskil, to be wise, corresponds to the choshen, to the breastplate. What does this mean? I've had a little bit of complex thinking about how to translate this, right? The Rebbe of Ishbitz probably did not speak to his followers and listeners in contemporary Hebrew. I'm going to say he spoke in Polish or in Yiddish, right? I think it's a reasonable guess. And the text that we have is a Hebrew translation. Ki ha'adam tzarich lehitbonein leda'at Hashem yitbarach. How do you put that into English? You need to think deeply.
Contemplate?
Lehitbonein is certainly to contemplate.
But to understand.
To understand, right? Bina is understanding. But lehitbonein is to understand yourself. Lida'at, to the mind or to the wisdom of God. Now put that into an English sentence that makes a certain amount of sense. What I'm being told to do is think myself into the mind of God. Align myself with God's thoughts, if that's humanly possible. Or certainly to the extent that we know what God thinks about. Because God's told us a lot of what he thinks, right? That's what this whole Bible is, that's what everything is, all of these books, right? He's going to be very, very specific here. The Choshen, as we've said, is the Choshen HaMishpat, right? The breastplate of judgment, right? And that, when the high priest wore it, procured atonement for errors in legal decisions. The text itself says in chapter 28 of Shemot, of Exodus, make for yourself a breastplate of judgment. There are two possible ways of understanding how he gets to this. This particular breastplate thing contained a mechanism for getting answers from God. Right? Whole separate class, we can spend a week talking about this. There was within it, or in and of itself, this breastplate was able to get you an answer from God to certain types of questions from certain levels of people within the Jewish nation. Or else it's just the Choshen HaMishpat. We're told it's a thing of judgment, and justice is blind. Justice is applied equally to all people, certainly in theory anyway, right? He says here, Ki etzlo lo yimtza shum ka'as al nafshot Yisrael. With God, there is no such thing as anger against the souls of Israel. The verse in Psalm says his wrath lasts for a moment, life results from his favor. Treat people equally. If you have done something wrong, God still loves you, and ultimately in the worldview, in the cosmic view of Ishbitz, you haven't done anything wrong. Your relationship with God is always pure, always perfect, always good, even if you have done wrong. Now, go back to his lifetime, or a little bit later, when these books were first printed. People burned them in the streets because of this sort of stuff, right? Because it's really, really difficult to say in a religious community of any sort that, number one, major characters in the Hebrew Bible who did some pretty terrible sins were actually doing some very good things at that same time. When you do a major sin, major crime, minor sin, you have done nothing wrong. At your absolute essence, you're still pure, you're still perfect. And you cannot damage yourself in any meaningful way. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have a past and a background. Right? So here we're saying, judge everybody very, very favorably. Remove anger, hate, and discrimination. The equality of all people. That's what it means to be wise. That's what the Choshen, that's what the breastplate is talking about. It also can refer to what we see in verse 15 there, is all the tribes are equally represented on it. If you look again at again, it's worthwhile doing a little bit of homework and reading this chapter 28 in the book of Exodus, because you see that on the breastplate were 12 stones. Each one represented one of the tribes. And they're a mixture of precious and semi-precious stones, and the value in antiquity was not the value that we have today. But they're equally represented by the same piece of a shiny, nice-looking stone. Right? And the names of the tribes are written on it. Everyone is equal. Right? Everyone is equal, no matter what you've done, no matter what your background, no matter how notorious you are. You're still part of the community. You're still part of the people of Israel. You're still good. Okay? So far, so good. Lishmoa. Feel free to interrupt and tell me this doesn't make any sense at all. Right? Lishmoa, number 3. To hear is represented by the me'il. Right? We're going down in the list, and the way that they are listed in order is I have done numbers according to the key words in the prayer before the Shema, because that's the list that I have in my head. You're perfectly entitled to do it in the order of how you put the clothes on when you get up in the morning, and that's what I think I've done in this list here. Obviously, you put your pants on before your shirt. And
Let me ask you, why do you say that's obvious? I think the Shulchan Aruch says the opposite.
Really? That he put the shirt on before the pants?
Yeah.
Interesting. I have no idea.
You start with the upper body and then the lower body.
This would not be in the Shulchan Aruch.
I'm saying a normal
no.
person. So the question is, who would end different?
The way that Kohen Gadol got dressed is not in the Shulchan Aruch at all. But, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about
But
how a normal person.
A normal person gets dressed, they put their pants on first. That's what you know this stuff better than I do.
We'll look
So.
at it later.
That's why we have you here. You are the source of wisdom. No, actually, you know this stuff and you remember it, where I don't.
You know what you said about we should accept our environment? Don't you think
People, not the environment. We're not talking about environment here.
I thought you said the reality around you, and I thought, well, I was trying to escape the reality into the kingdom of heaven, into being in a higher realm of
It's
grace.
totally and completely the opposite of what Chassidut teaches.
You know, to be in, to transcend the mundanity, the meaninglessness, the corruption all around you, into a better mental frame, into something more edifying.
We do talk about transcending and all that sort of good things, but the reality is God made this physical world. And from the point of view of the books that we are learning, from the great Hasidic masters, from the Zohar, the whole purpose is bring God's heaven here.
Yes.
Take the ordinary, mundane stuff and see the holiness and the power that is within it already.
Yes, okay. As long as heaven is actually what is the point.
No, heaven is here. Heaven is not the point. Heaven is definitely 100% not the point. You can have that point of view, and you can probably find chapter and verse for it, certainly in Christianity, and certainly also in some branches of Judaism. But the way we are looking at it is heaven is supposed to be made here. Because why else would God bother with making all of us and all of this? Because God already has heaven.
You see everything here with a heavenly light. You're looking at the reality of this world in this is God's heaven, and you're going to see it in terms of His goodness.
Yeah, you have to see the good and the purity and the sparks of holiness and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where, as long as you're in that.
As long as we're on the right track, right? Right? The number one way that I have of looking at all of these different opinions is there's more than one way to get from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, right? You can take the train, you can take the bus, you can take a car, you can get on a bicycle, ride a horse, but you're all going basically in the same direction. And the basic direction that the Hasidic masters are talking about is take what you have in front of you and see and extract the holiness in it. Right? And that's like a core thought, and then there's all the branches out from that. Okay? So, what do you have to listen for? We're on the Me'il. Lishmoa, to hear. He's going to tell you have to listen to yourself. Lishmoa hu neged ha-Me'il. The robe had bells on its hem. This means that a person should incline and listen to your foundation and root. We're into a couple of key words here. Where do you ultimately come from? Right? This is going to go back into what you're saying, because despite the fact that we're not saying this, we're going back into what you are saying. Where do you ultimately come from? Right? You don't come from your parents, you don't come from your grandparents. You come from your Yisod and your Shoresh. Your Yisod is your foundation, your root. Your Shoresh is literally your root. Right? And the basic picture is that your soul has its ultimate origins in or under, as part of the throne of God. All right, let's go take a little bit of a step back. At the very beginning of creation, God made one single being. God made Adam, right? Again, totally separate subject, but you need to have this sort of background. God made one single creature, one single being of pure light and energy. And that was the ultimate original soul. All of us are parts of that soul and descendants of parts of that soul, processed through incarnation, reincarnation, and more reincarnation. Also, the imagery is our souls and our origins are from the throne of God itself, however we understand that. There is God up there, and God is on a throne in some way. You know, this is the classic line that Rabbi Tat says all the time. We're talking about things for which there are no words. Right? I can't do his accent. There's no words for this. There's totally no words in English for it at all, in any language. But what we are at our essence is a bit of God. What we are at our real essence is a bit of Adam, the first creature that God made, at the very, very beginning of creation. And you have to try and listen and incline an ear to hear the sounds that you are making that will give you an indication where it is in heaven and in the first being you originally came from. Oi. Right? There is a section here in the Midrash which I did not reproduce in English. It goes back to, and I'm going to, because he does bring it up here. Job, right? I don't think the book of Job is a course we're going to do here. I don't know how popular
It's up to you. I don't know if there's opposition to it.
There's no opposition, but people coming to learn it, I'm not so sure. Job has these terrible things happen. One customer, good. Be careful what you nod your head for. Job has all these terrible things happen to him, and God is testing him, and he argues with God, right? And there's a couple of verses in here that come up and that are quoted, and Job is saying, why do these bad things happen to me? And God says, we can have this conversation if you are able to tell me what your ultimate source was. Was your soul, Job, when I made the first being? When I made Adam, when I made that first being of pure light and pure energy, where was your soul there? Because you need to have that level of knowledge to be able to have that conversation with me. This is God, and this is the Midrash in Shemot Rabbah, Exodus Rabbah. Right? And that's the next little bit that he's talking about. Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me if you know understanding. How was it in the first man? What he's pushing you towards here is not something that's impossible. And a lot of what the Rebbe of Ishbitz talks about over the course of the 3 volumes, and 3 very small volumes of his book, is trying to figure out what your real purpose is here on earth. How do you know what it is you're supposed to be doing? Why am I here? Why are we here? What's my purpose today? And then next week, what's my purpose today? And a week later, what's my purpose today? Because it changes. And these are big, overarching questions that have to be answered by any thinking, by any intelligent human being. Why am I here? What did God put me here on earth to do? Right? So that's where he's really pushing you. Right? That's why this sort of stuff is so appealing. This is why this is so dramatic. And that's why this stuff has to be learned. Because it reaches out and it grabs you. And if it's only one of this list of 8, we're doing very well. And if it's none of it, and you get into the next one we do, which will be a list of 5, and it's only one of those, I think that's huge progress. Huge progress. Because I know I make lists of things that I'm supposed to be doing. And what's the percentage success rate and completion rate? Right?
90%.
Thank you. Compliments get you everywhere, sir. The reality is I make lists and things get left for tomorrow, and we'll do that another day, and right? And of course there's no compulsion.
It never used to happen, but now it's happening.
Well, as I get a little older, I'm forgetting a few things as well, so I'll chalk that some up to just, the brain cells are gone. It is only, he says this here, this is one of the ones that he says, these 2 are the biggies. These 2 are the biggies here. Al yidei shadam yavo al yisodo. Through a person coming into contact with his root source. Mizeh yavin mashi tikein kavar ba'olam. He will understand that which he has already corrected in this world. Umat tzarich od letaken. And that which he has left to correct. This is what the Zohar tells us the Rhodes alludes to. It is something to do with reincarnation. You've got to listen to yourself because you are continually being given messages. And we did a very nice series of classes at Shir Chadash based on the tzaddik, the student of the Mei Shiloach, of how to listen for messages in your dreams. Right? So put in a request for that one. It's not dream work, lucid dreaming, controlling and remembering and learning from your dreams. But everything that happens is giving you a message and a lesson. Nothing happens without a reason, right? And also the big issue is reincarnation, right? This is not our first time around. This is not our second or our third time around. And you come into this world, into this particular body, into this particular set of circumstances with a soul that has attached to us a to-do list, right? But it's encoded. How do you find it? I don't know how to open my phone to read my list. I know I have to get milk on the way home. But what else am I supposed to do the rest of the day? What's that list? And we're given messages that are subtle, and we're given messages that are very much in your face. Some things are so obvious. Some things are a wake-up call, right? Your first heart attack tells you to go work out, and you do, right? Not to make light of heart attacks, but there are messages everywhere. There are messages everywhere, and we have to learn how to listen to them. And this is what the Shmela is, and this is what the Me'il, the tunic, the long tunic that reached down to the ankles of the priest, and it had bells on it, and it made a sound. We make sound. We make noise as we walk through this world. And the noise is not just what we're saying and what we're doing. It can just appear to be incidental, like the tinkling of those little bells on the robe of the priest. But it's playing a tune and it's telling us something. Okay? Next one, right? We've glossed over a little bit of stuff in here, but I just don't want to make this too complex and too heavy. This is, after all, a positive set of rules. You are not being condemned for not listening to yourself. You are not being condemned for not thinking everyone is equal. You are being told, aspire to these traits. Take on these habits, and you're going to have a great life. Right, Lilmod, which is to learn, is number 4. Huneged hamitznefet. That is parallel to the mitre, I've said here, which is not necessarily the word that we're all familiar with, but the turban or the hat, the ceremonial hat that the priests wore. We know from the Gemara that we started out with that the mitre atones for arrogant thoughts, crude thoughts. Thinking someone is just not so smart. They're not as good as me. There's nothing in that person over there, or that group of people, right? What this means is, l'kabel emet misha omro. You must accept truth. You must listen, because everybody has something to teach you. Absolutely everybody. And here in Israel, everybody wants to teach you something, right? This we know very well. You will get a lesson in child rearing, even if you have no children with you. You will get a lesson in how to bake, or what's the best bakery in town. No matter what it is, people are trying to teach you something. But in terms of people, there are people who come into your life for a minute or two. You sit next to them on the bus or on the airplane, you get in a conversation. What does that crude, ignorant, stupid, ugly guy have to tell me? You never know. You never know. The whole purpose of your existence and his existence is to exchange this piece of wisdom and put it to use. The next one is a very, very big one, l'lamed, to teach, which is number 5. Neged hatzitz. What do we call the tzitz? The tzitz was a golden plate, right? I will eventually standardize all of these things and say the same thing and the same name for everything. The golden plate, which went on top of the turban and that went on top of the head of the priest, is to teach. About the golden plate, it is said, and this is the text in the Bible itself in chapter 28 of Exodus, V'haya al mitzcho tamid l'ratzon. And it shall always be on his forehead. The turban went down over the forehead, and the tzitz went on top of that. So it was over here, but it was covered already. And it says l'ratzon. And we would read the text in the Bible as saying, well, God is saying put this on so we will be in favor with God. That's the pshat, that's the very basic, obvious meaning. But l'ratzon, the Rabbi of Ishbitz is saying, is to make people favorable in the sight of God. You have this thing on your head that says, holy to God on it. And everyone who sees you, that's all they see. They're going to see all these precious stones and valuable material that your clothes are made of. But there's this little band of pure gold that says, holy to God. Everyone is acceptable. Everyone is holy. Everyone is favorable in the eyes of God. Which means, and he is going to extract from this, she'yihyeh li'adam ayin tova. You should have a good eye. Lilamed et chavero, to teach other people. You have to look, I haven't translated it correctly, I'm sorry. You have to teach and inspire other people, not just look upon them favorably. Yeah, it's the second paragraph from the bottom on page number 3. I did not translate this correctly. It is to teach and to inspire. And if you go to the 7 habits of Stephen Covey, that is habit number 8. Find your voice and inspire others. Share wisdom. One of the biggest curses of this world. One of the number one things that is preventing the Messiah from arriving. Here's your, 9 days, month of Av, destruction of the temple lesson thrown in here. What's keeping the Messiah back? What's preventing the ultimate reign of peace, love, and harmony in this world? The fact that we begrudge other people wisdom, wealth, happiness. It's not that we don't share. We share. We're very charitable. But that guy over there, look at that house. Look at that car he drives. Look at how tall and thin that woman is. However it is, and whatever our prospect, whatever our perspective is, whatever it is, we're not just jealous of them, we begrudge them. And we don't want them to have it. And we're unhappy that someone else has success.
How do you take that out of you?
That has to be beaten out of you.
Has to be what?
That has to be beaten out of you. That is, in terms of the Mea Shiloach, in terms of his student Rabbi Tzadok, this is the ultimate end of days battle. Right? That there is wisdom and is to be shared for everyone. What's the biggest thing that we see today in the world around us? This is entirely an aside. BDS. Boycott, divest. Don't let anyone else have an opinion. That is the most evil way of looking at the world and other people. You can have an opinion that is 100% opposite to mine. You can say the state of Israel doesn't deserve to exist. Say it. But don't say, I am not entitled to have my opinion that the state of Israel is sacred and a blessing to the world. Right? This is the war, and we're in the beginning of the Messianic era and the beginning of this particular fight. Ask Rabbi Chesed about this. He's 100% into all of these things.
Sunday night, you have to play.
That's a plug. Absolutely. Totally fascinating speaker. Right? Ask him what the ultimate battle, what's the ultimate number one battle that is going to be fought before the Messiah arrives. The battle against miserliness and begrudging other people an opinion, a thought, or anything of value that they have. Right? We've got to get to the end of this today, or else we won't get into anything else. Right? Look favorably upon other people. Share your wisdom with them. Don't be afraid, and don't think that you don't have something to share. You may be educated, you may have 0 degrees and never finished elementary school. You may be smart and articulate, you may not be, right? Some people are afraid to talk. Some people are afraid to talk in public. Some people are afraid to say what's on their mind. Share your wisdom. And even if you're not very wise and not very smart, you have experience. All of us have been through things. None of us have had a perfect, happy, wonderful life up to this moment, right? Okay, I haven't. So,
But it used to be a lot better.
no, it wasn't. Before we came on Aliyah, our life was filled with stupidity and nonsense and mortgage payments, right? All that sort of rubbish. Right? Lishmor, to keep. Bottom paragraph on 3. Could you pass me some of that water, please? I think I would greatly appreciate it. I have a cup, I just don't have anything to put in. Thank you.
Does this apply what you say even to Christianity?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, Christians also have an opinion.
They're entitled to an opinion. Jews have never sought to convert Christians. I mean, it's a historical argument. Have we tried to convert people or not? I'm not a historian. But the basic Jewish attitude is, if you're a Christian, be a good Christian. If you're a Zoroastrian, be a good Zoroastrian. Right? Just don't hurt us. Don't hurt other people. Right? Live and let live. Right? Real simple. It's the sort of thing your grandmother always told you. You know? Live and let live. Right? Or my grandmother never told me anything, so I never really knew them. So, lishmor, to keep. Neged haketonet parallels the tunic. The tunic atones for bloodshed. Joseph's coat is called a ketonet. Right? You remember the story of Joseph. He gets his coat of many colors as a gift from his father. They send him off into slavery, and then they dip the coat in blood and pretend that Joseph is being killed. What he says here, it atones for murder. Hu sheyishmor ha'adam et atzmo. Hopefully none of us ever come to murder, right? I've had the desire at times, but I've never done anything about it, particularly when my children are concerned, right? Sheyishmor ha'adam et atzmo shelo yavo mechamato shum hezek lechavero. He makes this into a much broader statement that you should keep yourself from harming anyone in any way. You don't have to kill somebody, but you can harm people in many different ways. And in addition, he's going to add an extra layer. Do not put yourself into a position where someone suspects you of doing something that you haven't done. Be blameless. Be completely ethical. And if your friend suspects you of having done something wrong, he too is punished for causing his friend to suspect him. Okay, that's a complicated and mixed up English sentence. If I do something that causes you to suspect that I have, for example, robbed a bank, right? You are punished for suspecting me of bank robbery, even though I haven't done it. But even more, I'm punished for causing you to suspect me of robbing the bank, because I just mentioned I happen to have $1 million in cash.
And this week's parsha, you should be like those 2.5 tribes brought suspicion upon themselves. They had the wrong motives.
Yep.
Not just to be clean in front of man, I got.
Yeah, you've got to act in a way which doesn't get your friends, people who see you, into a mindset of thinking that, well, you're this bank robber, you're this whatever it is. We're not going to go beyond, the one single example, right? La'asot, to do, parallels the ephod, the sort of backwards aprony thing. This is not an easy one, but it does make a certain amount of sense. The ephod refers to relying or leaning on. It's a little bit hazy in how this connects. All of the others connect either verbally, the words themselves, there's a reference in the Bible, there's a reference in the Talmud. Here it's a little bit hazy, but it still works. The point is the point. The main way of having depending, who can you really depend on? You can depend on God, right? And you depend on God by doing mitzvot, and then you can stand before God in prayer and lean on them and lean on them. Ki adam tzarich leda. You have to know that there is no thing in this world that does not leave something and transfer something to the next world. Everything good that you do scores your points over there. And when you're praying, when you're talking to God, you have to have something that you can say, just a moment. I spent the day learning Torah. I did all of these mitzvahs. I helped these people. Then you've got something to talk to God about. That's the topics of conversation. That's the thing that you can lean on and rely on. Because even if you have done some bad things, you still have the list. You never actually lose the good points that you've scored. Okay? The ephod refers to having something to lean on, to lie on, to depend on. And the kayem, the last one, is really quite obvious.
What about, sorry,
Please.
there's somewhere that in the Bible, I don't know where, one of the prophets, it says, if a righteous man turns from his righteousness and does something evil, all his righteous deeds will be forgotten. And only the evil will be remembered. If the evil man turns from his evil and does righteous, only the righteous will be remembered.
I'm not certain where you're quoting from.
I don't know, but when as soon as you started telling me the verse, there's a verse that says, the Chesed,
Jeremiah.
truth and righteousness atone for sin. It's amazing, right? Is that what you're referring? In other words,
I'm gonna assign you some homework. Find the verse, please.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure it's in our Bible, but it may be. Here, the basic point is, and the basic Jewish point of view from the point of view of the Rabbi of Ishbitz, and what he's telling you is, everything good that you ever do, every mitzvah that you do, no matter how badly you do it, no matter what you do before or after, that is a point in your favor, and that is always there in the bank for you. Okay, last one, we got to finish up. L'kayem uneged ha'michnasayim, to uphold parallels the trousers as they cover the genital regions. In the Bible, erva refers to two different things. In Genesis 42, Bereshit Membet, Joseph, as the viceroy of Egypt, accuses the brothers of coming to see ervat haaretz, meaning the nakedness of the land, the Achilles heel of the land, the means of getting the upper hand, of destroying the weaknesses. That, through it, the land can be conquered. So you have a very, very powerful Torah that is here in Ishbitz, and again in Reb Tzadok, that we've brought up a couple of times, that opposites come into the world together, right? Through your sexual activity, through your immorality, through your whatever, we're totally not going to go into the whole area of what you do or don't do, you can either lose absolutely everything that you have. It's the Achilles heel, certainly for us men. Right? Women are on a higher spiritual level, right? But this is the activity and the area that you can literally destroy everything, lose everything, or if used with restraint and with intellect, you can then have binyan ad, a reputation and generations that follow on from you forever and ever, right? So that's the 8 garments. What I've done on page number 4 here is give you a list of what you should do according to each of those 8 paragraphs and discussions and garments that we've already gone through. The formation and formulation in English is mine. Number 1, stop imagining, remove anger and discrimination, know yourself at the deepest soul level, accept advice and wisdom from anyone, share knowledge, don't hurt people and be above suspicion, do mitzvot, do what God tells you to do, have a relationship with God. What do you want to talk to God about? right? What do you talk to your closest friends about? Rabbi Poston and I meet on the street. What do we talk about? The Parsha, Torah, right? That's what you have. That's what you have. That's what really life is all about. And achieve perpetuity and eternity through restraint in your intimate relations. Okay? That brings to an end part one of this exploration of the lists of the Rabbi of Ishbitz. Next time, I think we'll go back a paragraph and take a look at the same list, because it'll use the same sort of handouts, and we will then look at a list of 5 things that come out of this 8-garment list. Right? How does he do that? I'm not so sure, but we'll figure it out. I will write up a translation for you. And that will be Tuesday of next week at 4. Okay? Chodesh Tov. This is a good month, a happy month. The Hasidic rabbis tell us that this is a month of happiness, this is a month of joy, this is the month when the Messiah is born, this is when God is giving us all of the greatest good that there can ever be. It just comes down to us expressed in something that's a little more difficult and unpleasant. Right? And we have to see beyond that.
Shama shir shir chadam